The Annual Migration of Clouds is a cli-fi post-apocalyptic novella by author Premi Mohammed. It takes place in the distant future, after the climate crisis has entirely disrupted life as we know it, and a mysterious, mind-controlling fungus has wormed its way through the scattered population. The story focuses on a choice. Reed, a young woman who carries this parasite, has been given a chance to move far away, to study in one of the few communities sustained by pre-disaster technology. But her mother is ill, and in a world where the planting season is planned down to the minute, everybody counts. It's not easy for her to leave her loved ones behind. To set her family up for life, Reed decides to take part in a foolhardy and dangerous mission. To accomplish this task, she must ask others to put great trust in her, but she can't easily separate her own thoughts from the parasite's will, making it difficult for her to even trust herself. If you're not yet familiar with Premi Mohammed, you're sure to hear of her soon. She's an Indo-Caribbean scientist and author based in Edmonton, Alberta, where this book is set, and a rising star in speculative fiction. Premi is a biologist and works in the field of climate science, so the depiction of Reed's parasitic passengers is eerily plausible, and the climate disaster scenarios in the book are grounded in modern-day research predicting an all-too-likely future. Yet there's still hope to be found here. Rather than doubling down on the hardships of life after technology, as so many gritty apocalyptic novels do, this book's focus is on connection and friendship, the things that bind us together. It shows the world moving forward after terrible hardships, including natural disaster and plague, and reflects upon the importance of community, our duty to take care of one another, and our collective ability to get through difficult times. In other words, it is exactly the sort of book we need right now. This is Cast of Wonders, the young adult fiction podcast featuring stories of the fantastic. Welcome. Episode 474. I'm Catherine Inskip, your editor and host. Our story for today is Little Free Library by Naomi Kritzer. This story was first published in Tor.com, April 2020. Naomi Kritzer is a science fiction and fantasy writer living in St. Paul, Minnesota, who has been writing science fiction and fantasy for 20 years. Her short story, Cat Pictures Please, won the 2016 Hugo and Locus Awards and was nominated for the Nebula Award. Her book, Catfishing on Catnet, won the Minnesota Book Award and the Edgar Award and was a finalist for the Nebula Award, and as of the beginning of June 2020, it is currently a finalist for the Locus Award, the ITW Thriller Award and the Lodestar Not a Hugo Award. Naomi also writes about politics, mainly elections in Minneapolis and St. Paul, as a hobby and as a form of public service. This story is narrated by Diane Thieverson-Maury. Diane Thieverson is a lyric soprano specialised in early music, specifically Baroque and medieval music and Lieder art song. She is an enthusiastic teacher of singing, taking her cues from her mentor, the late Cornelius Reed, and his long-term student and mentor in her own right, Carol Bagot-Ford. Diane has been involved in the speculative poetry scene, yes, it's a thing, since 2010. She has narrated for the Starship Sofa podcast magazine since Tony C. Smith started running fiction, and found out that she reads aloud to her husband. She quickly became his go-to girl when he wanted poetry read. As a result of that affinity with poetry, and because she does her best work when she has a cause, a budding superheroine, she decided to take up as speculative fiction poetry's spokesperson. She produced a sporadic podcast which ran as part of Starship Sofa called Poetry Planet, and is a member of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association, SFPA, and currently serves as membership chair, volunteer wrangler, and communications coordinator. She has reviewed genre poetry for Amazing Stories magazine and the SFPA's Starline magazine, and edited an issue of the SFPA's online journal, Eye to the Telescope, on the theme of music. She continues to narrate stories for Starship Sofa and other podcasts, notably Escape Pod, Podcastle and Tales to Terrify, and audiobook narrations. The best place to find her is on the web because she tends to pick up and move to another country at the drop of a hat, having lived in Germany, the UK, and France in the past 12 years. She and her small family, a rocket scientist and a young multilinguist, currently reside in a home county in England. Before we start, we'd like to share that Little Free Library is a registered trademark of Little Free Library Limited, a 501c3 non-profit organisation. And now, we've a tale to tell.
Little Free Library by Naomi Kritzer. Megan built her Little Free Library from a kit because she wanted to make it into art. She sanded the wood and painted it with primer, then glued on the rocks she'd picked up from the Lake Superior shore over the summer, and used acrylics to paint indigo swirls around them. When she mounted it on the post outside her St. Paul house, she decided to paint the post too, and painted a fuchsia road winding around the post to the box at the top, and outlined the road in smaller pebbles. There was a little bit of glitter in the fuchsia craft paint, and she decided that the book cabinet should have some of that as well. Finally, she screwed on the sign that said Little Free Library with the instructions, "Take a book, return a book." Megan had never seen a Little Free Library before she moved to St. Paul, but here, they were everywhere. Each Little Free Library was basically just a box of free books, sheltered from the weather. You could register them on a website. Sometimes people specialized in one type of books or used the second shelf for a seed exchange. She was figuring she'd start by unloading the books she'd enjoyed, but knew she'd never read again. She'd moved them up with her, but she didn't have enough space, and anyway, they were mostly just gathering dust. Passed along to someone else, they could be read and enjoyed and used. She could see the Little Free Library from her living room and watched the first day as some of the neighborhood kids stopped to peer in. When she checked that afternoon, she noticed that Ender's Game, Dragon Singer, and Danny Dunn and the Homework Machine had all been taken. The next day, someone had left a copy of the Da Vinci Code, which made her grimace. But hey, there were people who adored that book, so why not? She put in her extra copy of Fellowship of the Ring, along with 2 Terry Pratchett books. When she got up on Tuesday morning, the Little Free Library was empty. They did warn you on the website that sometimes people just cleaned it out, and she'd taken the time to stamp her own books, always a gift, never for sale, to hopefully discourage anyone from thinking they could resell them to a used bookstore. She heaved a frustrated sigh, restocked it with more books from the box she'd set aside, and after thinking about it, hand-wrote a note that people would see when they opened the library. To whomever took all the books, in the future, please just take 1 or 2 at a time, or consider leaving a book for others to enjoy. For now, I hope you enjoy reading the books you took. Please share them with others when you are done reading. When she got home from work on Tuesday afternoon, someone had taken the copy of Pawn of Prophecy, and on the top shelf of the Little Free Library where Pawn of Prophecy had been, they had left behind a sanded piece of wood that on closer inspection she realized was a hand-carved whistle made from a twig. She took that inside and set it on her mantelpiece, and then put out Queen of Sorcery. The next day, Queen of Sorcery was gone, and someone had left behind a little metal figurine of a snake. It was very heavy, and reminded her of the antique lead soldiers that had been made as children's toys, but her parents stored on a high shelf as decorative objects, since lead is a terrible material for a child's toy. She took it inside and put it next to the whistle, then set out the next book from the Belgariad. For the next 2 weeks, the mystery borrower left things behind each day, some of it very strange. A small dark green bird's feather that looked like it had been shed by a blackbird, except for the color, a tiny clay vessel with a cork held in place with rust-colored wax, a carved stone animal too abstract to identify, a circlet of thin carved stone that was too big to be a ring and too small to be a bracelet, a hand-hammered safety pin. These gifts were unnecessary, but delightful. Megan took pictures of them and sent the pictures in email to her friends back home, 2 of whom ordered little free libraries of their own to give away their own spare books. They reported back that these boxes turned out to be a great way to meet their neighbors, and everyone thought they were very cool, but they had not been the recipient of feathers or carvings. Then one day, on a page of brittle yellow paper that looked like it had been cut from one of the blank pages of an older paperback, "To the Librarian." Is there a sequel to The Fellowship of the Ring? I would very much like to read it. I will leave behind anything I have for the other books, if you will give them to me. Also, I am sorry about the day I took everything. I promise I will never do this again. What would you like in trade for the next book about Frodo, if there is one? It was written in ink, slightly blotchy, like the writer had used a dip pen, but didn't know quite how to write with it. Right. St. Paul had no shortage of artists and eccentrics. Maybe this could lead to a friendship with someone close by. Grinning to herself, Megan pulled out the 2 towers from her box of books and slipped in a note. To the person who requested the next book about Frodo, leave me some art you have created and we'll call it a good trade. The Librarian. There was no gift the next day, but the day after a piece of paper, again cut from the back of a paperback book, judging from the size, was left behind, rolled up and tied with a red thread. Megan slipped off the thread and unrolled the paper. Done in the same slightly brownish ink as the letter, it was a line drawing of a cat. This was getting really fun. Megan wondered which of her neighbors this was. Another request should be coming soon. No one finishes the 2 towers and doesn't want to read The Return of the King. In the meantime, she left out the next book from the Belgariad, a Valdemar novel, and a picture book about a small fire-breathing dragon's trip to the dentist. Sure enough, another note was left the next day. To the Librarian. Surely there is another book about Frodo? I have drawn you another picture, but if you would prefer something else, I can provide it. The person had drawn a picture of a leaf underneath the note. It looked like a maple leaf with 5 lobes, but with additional hooks and spikes on the edges, so it looked almost fractal. To my correspondent, she wrote, please leave me a leaf like the one you drew. She was expecting something cut out, maybe from paper, but it was a real leaf that got left in the place of Return of the King, green and fresh from the tree. It looked almost like a maple leaf, but not. For extra weirdness, it was February. There weren't any green, blooming trees in her neighborhood. It was gray and frigid, and everything was blanketed with snow. But maybe they'd put a leaf in the freezer or something. Or maybe the leaf had dropped off some sort of potted tree they kept in their house. Or maybe they'd picked it illicitly while visiting the St. Paul Conservatory, which was filled with tropical trees. She took a picture of the leaf and sent it to her friend back home with the botany hobby, to see if she could identify it. Her friend sent her back a slightly baffled message. It did look sort of like a maple, but not a variety of maple she was familiar with. She suggested that Megan try the extension service at the U. Instead, Megan stashed it on top of her refrigerator and tried not to think about it. A fun correspondence with an artist playing a game was really all she wanted to imagine herself doing. But a day later, when she went outside to restock it, she left behind a copy of Defending Your Castle, which she'd bought because it looked hilarious, but only ever skimmed through since she had no real intention of digging a moat around her house or installing ballustae. That book was gone the next day. And a day later, a tiny, glinting gold coin was left behind with another letter. To the Librarian. I don't know what I did to deserve the favor of the gods, but I am grateful, so grateful, for your kindness to me. I believe our cause to be lost. I believed that I would never have the opportunity to avenge what was done to my family. Now, suddenly, I have been gifted with a way forward. Blessings on you. If you can bring me more such books, I will leave you every scrap of gold I can find. The gold coin was a tiny disc, the size of a dime but thinner. There was an image of a bird with spread wings stamped into one side. The other showed Either a candelabra or a rib cage. Megan wasn't sure. Megan's kitchen scale thought the coin weighed 4 grams, which, if it was actually gold, was over $100 worth of gold. Of course, most gold-colored metal items weren't actually gold, but it was noticeably heavy for its tiny size, and when she tried a magnet, it was most definitely not magnetic. In theory, she could have bitten it, but she didn't want to mess up the pictures stamped in. For the first time, she felt a pang of uncertainty. What is really going on here? Who am I giving books to? An artist, she told herself firmly. A storyteller. A neighbor. This is probably bronze or brass or some other yellow metal, and they hammer it themselves as a hobby, just like they carve whistles and all the rest. She tucked in a coloring book about Roman aqueducts and left a note. Who are you? She also left behind a notepad, since the thought of someone cutting blank pages out of a book to write on made her feel odd. A few minutes later, she went back out and added a pen. I am a servant of the rightful queen and heir, displaced by her uncle. At his orders, she took vows to join an order of lay sisters, where she's lived ever since. But all my prayers were answered the day I found your library, and I will forever be your servant, librarian of the books of the tree. We have begun constructing a ballista in secret. Please send me more books. Megan bought a copy of The Knowledge, How to Rebuild Civilization, to put in the box, then a book on military history, then Weapons by the Diagram Group, then an Army Tactical Manual. Each book was rewarded with coins, all of them stamped with candelabra, or skeleton, and bird, all of them gold, or gold-colored at least. She was finding it increasingly hard to concentrate on anything other than her library, on new books to leave, on who exactly might be coming, on whether she really still believed that this was an artist and neighbor playing an interesting game with her. Twice she tried to watch the box from her living room overnight, but both times she fell asleep. Finally, one day she found a note. We are ready. Many thanks for all your help. Pray for our victory. And the notes stopped. Someone did take her copy of Greek fire, poison arrows, and scorpion bombs, but did not leave a coin or a letter. After a few days of nothing, she gathered up the coins and took them to a jeweler, who told her that yes, they were real gold, and he could give her $1,245 for the lot if she wanted to sell them. No one spends over $1,000 on a joke. She didn't want to sell them. If she'd been about to lose her house, she'd definitely have done it. But the thought of parting with this tangible evidence of whatever had happened, no. She told the jeweler she'd think about it and took them home again. Back at her house, she went looking for the leaf she'd left on top of her refrigerator, but it had dried up and crumbled away. She looked through the gifts again, the ones that had been left before the coins started. She could take them to someone, maybe, see what they thought, if they wouldn't think she was crazy. If they didn't think this stuff was stolen, it occurred to her that it might in fact be stolen, that maybe someone was playing a game with her, and that person blithely gave away $1,200 worth of gold because it didn't actually belong to them. But she looked through pictures of ancient coins and found nothing that looked like what she had. The hand-forged safety pin was a fibula, though, and she found some pictures that were similar. Some were from ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Some were from modern artists selling their wares on Etsy. One warm night, spring had arrived finally, she set up a chair in her yard and tried again to sit watch. She dozed despite herself and startled awake at some odd hour of the very late night and looked. The box was gone. Missing. She stared at its spot, and then saw it. It was back, or it had never actually gone. She was left frustratingly uncertain. It felt like she'd read a book, only to find the last page missing. Then one Monday morning she opened the little free library and found another note, along with a box that looked like it had been hand-carved from a block of wood. "All is lost," the note said. "Our superior weaponry could not match their advantage of numbers. Our last hope is to send my lady's child forth into your keeping before they are upon us. As you keep books, so may you keep her child." "Child?" Megan thought with alarm. She opened the box. Nestled inside the wood was a straw lining and an egg. It was large, not enormous like an ostrich egg, but it filled the palm of her hand. It was silvery green in color, with markings that looked almost like scales. "What do you do with eggs?" "Well, you keep them warm." She took it inside. Note: Little free libraries are real. I know several people who have them, though alas, none of theirs are portals to another world.
If I had to describe a story that was quintessentially Cast of Wonders, there's a good chance that it'd sound a lot like this one. We have a very large soft spot for libraries, fairies, unexpected battles, education, and new beginnings. If you've ever wondered about the sense of wonder that we look for in our stories, well, this one is jam-packed with it. I love how it tells multiple stories at once, the mystery of any library's other borrowers, the possibility of connecting with new friends, and a glimpse of a deeper, more magical world. It also empowers the audience to be encouraged in their own acts of generosity, education, or allyship. Megan's encounter with the magical is certainly a life-changing one, but it's worth recognising that her role in this story carries some cautionary nuance. The people she's been helping in their civil war have not been saved, and the changes she's wrought will have consequences. She has responsibility for a child now from an entirely unfamiliar world. The story will continue, but just like the books in her library, Megan's story is not the only one to be shared. Join us again soon. We love bringing you the best audio fiction week after week, but we can't do it without your support. Your donations pay our authors, our narrators, our servers and our staff. Please consider supporting us with a monthly donation through either PayPal or Patreon. You can also review us on Apple Podcasts, request us on Spotify, and consider the stories we publish for award consideration. There are lots of ways you can help. Join the discussion on the EA Forum, forum.escapeartists.net, or the EA Discord. Visit us on Twitter at Cast of Wonders. Come say hello. Cast of Wonders is a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and is brought to you by editor Catherine Inskip, assistant editors Andrew K. Ho and Carissa Sluss, editorial assistant Amy Brennan, associate editors Amy Brennan, Alicia Caparasso, William Haight Minor, Umera Hussain, Sean Proctor, Ray O, Susie Rodriguez, Emma Smales and Denise Sudell. Our art director is Alexis Goebel, our community manager is Denise Sudell, and our audio producer is Jeremy Carter. Our episodes are released under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. That means you can download or listen to the episode on any device you like, but you can't change it or sell it. Our theme music, Appeal to Heavens, is by Alexei Nov and available from Promo DJ or his Facebook page. Thank you for listening.